which there's a shameless plug right there. That's a good reason to be on our private investor list, so you can get access to those types of deals as we pull them up and start buying them.
Absolutely, 100%.
Freedom isn't the result of wealth. It's the foundation. Welcome to Wealth Independence, where freedom leads and real wealth follows through battle-tested strategies, hard-won lessons, and real-world experience. You'll discover how to accelerate your path to true financial independence. And now your hosts, Dustin Bailey and Adam Penn.
All right, welcome to the Wealth Independence Podcast, where freedom leads and real wealth follows. I'm Dustin Bailey, here with Adam Penn. Adam, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, 2025. I can't believe 2024 passed so quickly.
Yeah, I guess it's the thing that, like, as you get older, the years are like a smaller percentage of your overall existence, so they go faster or something.
Yep.
That theory,
Yep.
I think that definitely seems to hold true. 2024 just like went away in the blink of an eye.
I've heard that. Well, today we want to talk about goal setting, a little bit of our outlook for the year, some of the key events that we're going to be going to, the ones that we find valuable, and maybe a few others that we're not going to that we found value in the past, but maybe we're just not repeating. So with that being said, are there any market trends that you're interested to see in this coming new year?
I mean, it was interesting. It was on a webcast recently that Marcus and Millichap put on, and they were talking about the apartment forecast for 2025. It's weird to say this year, but we're here. It's interesting. I think from a real estate standpoint, I'm definitely excited. I think we're going to see more deals this year. I think we're just going to see more as the market has stabilized, particularly the lending environment, even if rates aren't as low as people had hoped.
Yeah. Sellers are going to have to adjust.
Exactly. Like, the stability honestly matters more than what the rates actually are. Like, once things are stable, people can actually conduct business. And so I think, certainly hopeful like others, that we're going to see the Fed continue to cut rates, and we'll see rates continue to slowly drop some this year. I don't think it's going to be massive, but I do think that overall stability in the lending environment is going to start to open up some more deals, and some folks that have maybe been some sellers that have been sitting on properties for a while are finally going to realize it's time to just sell. They're not going to get that massive drop in cap rates like they've been hoping for, and we're not going back to the 2021 era pricing, at least this year. So I think from an investing standpoint, that's probably the biggest thing I'm excited about it. You know, we're looking in several markets, and I think we're going to start to see more deals in 2025 than we have in the last couple of years.
And we're just a few days away from inauguration. So what does this administration look like as far as regulation in the investing environment? I mean, we saw, especially right after the election, we saw a pretty hefty run up in the stock market. What do you think, especially with the Department of Government Efficiency and things of that, other than Dogecoin going to the roof, what else do you think might this administration look like for investing?
That was exactly what came to mind. I mean, I'm excited about the possibility of. I'm not the only one. I mean, I think even people who I've seen a lot online of folks who may have not necessarily voted for Trump, but they're still excited about the possibility of some red tape coming down and the ability to move faster, the ability to build things. I think there's palpable sense of like, okay, we're going to be able to really get some stuff done. I'm excited about that. You know, I think it's obviously unknown what's the exact impacts will be, but it certainly seems to be from the appointments for different agencies, the SEC being one that ends up relevant for a lot of what we do. I think it's definitely going to be a more deregulation type stance. Yeah. And I'm excited about that and kind of what that's going to do. You know, we're talking, anytime you stand up a new deal, there's all sorts of, regulatory overhead. And honestly, it adds no value to anybody, really. Yeah. It's just a bunch of hoops to have to jump through. And so I'm excited. Again, not saying there's not value in investor protection and all of that, but a lot of it just ends up being kind of needless hoop jumping. So excited about the possibility of seeing some of that go away and everybody being able to move faster.
I think that might also lead to more deals being done this year because there's more of a stable environment, right? There's not going to be administration change like people were expecting back in 2024. So
for sure. No, it goes back. You remove uncertainty and people, it honestly doesn't matter what the rule set becomes. once people know the rules to play by, they can actually go out and start playing. And so I think we're really going to start seeing a lot of that this year. And, going back to apartments, I think it's going to be a great year to buy. Consensus still seems to be we're going to see a lot of the remaining supply, the stuff that's being built is going to continue to, flush out. It's going to come to the market really probably starting next year, 2026 and into 2027. The supply crunch is going to hit. Obviously, there's to tie this back in with the new administration, there's a question about what happens with immigration, right? There's a lot of population that has come here illegally in the last few years, and depending on how aggressive this administration decides to get with removing them, that could negatively impact rental real estate. So I'm curious to see how that trend plays against the housing shortage, but overall I'm bullish. I mean, even when you look at those numbers and what's being talked about as far as an impact there on the immigration side, we're still short housing, right? And that's going to really become apparent again starting next year. So I think now's the time to buy. Now's the time to start locking in some prices before rents start going up, and especially in the commercial space, we start seeing values really accelerating again.
Which there's a shameless plug right there. That's a good reason to be on our private investor list, so you can get access to those types of deals as we pull them up and start buying them.
Absolutely, 100%.
So let's talk a little bit about the conferences coming up this year. I know you've got a Q1 mastermind meetup with the collective, and right after that is the goals workshop with Robert Helms. That's a fun 2.5 day event where you really go deep into goal setting and talking about what do you really want out of life. He'll ask you that question probably like 10,000 times. Okay, that's what you want, but what do you really want? And so really kind of just an opportunity with your phone off for 2 days to essentially journal and figure out what it is you're doing. And we'll talk a little bit more about goal setting as we go through the rest of this episode. But let's talk about some of the other events that you're excited to maybe attend this year, or ones that we went to last year that we saw value in.
Yeah, no, excited about that mastermind. I've really, done a lot of traveling the last few years to events, and I'm, at least for the first half of the year, I'm kind of trying to pull back a little bit, to be honest, to focus a little bit more on getting some stuff done on execution, actually moving things in the business forward. But still a few things on the radar. I think it's in May. It's scheduled. The George Gammon's got his Rebel Investor Live. So be going to that, and I know we'll have a collective mastermind around that as well. So do that, and then sign up to go on the Real Estate Guys Summit at Sea in June. So I'm excited about that. That's
a fun one because you get to spend 7 days with some fairly influential people. Kiyosaki's come before, Ken McElroy's been there a handful of times, and you get a lot of you don't get, your average real estate investor who can take, or even your average just person who can take 7 days off, go on a expensive cruise, and wants to just talk about real estate for, half or more of every day, 7 days in a row. So you want to talk just a little bit more about that? Is there anything else you want to add?
Yeah, I went for the first time a couple years ago, and I mean, it's a fairly incredible event. I mean, it's not cheap, but that acts as a filtering mechanism, right? You end up with some very, very high quality people there, and it's neat. I mean, you spend all that time, especially it starts those first day and a half or so at the hotel, but once you're on the ship, right? And like we end up spending a whole lot of time around all the other summiteers, and everyone's there, and you end up in conversations at dinner or at the pool or at the coffee shop or at a bar, one of the random bars somewhere in the in the ship. And so there's all this unstructured time for conversation with folks that you might not otherwise normally have access to, and certainly not going to have that much time. It's one of the benefits to being there. Everybody's kind of dedicated to that. Once you're on the cruise, you're on the cruise. It's a great event. Honestly, I love it. Not just for the, there's a lot of educational content. A lot of the sessions are good, but it's really the conversations, again, at dinner, by the pool, doing excursions, whatever, like the really unstructured, informal time, those conversations and the things you learn, again, the stuff you get into, the topics that just end up coming up, that's where the real value in that trip is. And if you have the ability to do it, I highly recommend anybody goes.
Seems like that's really where you start to drive that ROI. And I'm sure we'll talk about more events kind of as we continue through the year, but those are some of the high-level ones that one or both of us will be at. Obviously, if you're going to any of those, reach out to us. We'd love to chat while we're there.
What about you? Is anything on your radar?
Well, last year I really liked Limitless. I'm not sure if I'll make it again this year. That's later in the year, but Limitless was a really good event. And then the collective mastermind meetups were good, and the events around them, right? You get high quality people. The summit was good. There's some IMN events around short-term rentals that I think I will go to this year, just because they're a little more specific on the short-term rental side of things for our management company.
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned that. I actually came across something today. There's some of these like very industry-specific sorts sorts of things that I've been looking at that I might go into. There was one, I mean, this applies more to you and I as fund managers and syndication sponsors, but there's a big push in the RIA and the formal investment advisor world right now to deploy more capital into our space, the alternative asset space. And there's some conferences that are dedicated to that. And I think I'm excited about that because obviously that's a funding source for deals that we find. But then that's also, I'm excited to tap into it because it's getting a pool of people who might not otherwise know or would be investing in this space to get some exposure to a space that we love and definitely want more investors in. So got turned on to a couple of events there. Not sure if I'll end up at them, but there's definitely some of those more industry or very like niche specific events that are on my radar as well.
I think with that, let's dive into, kind of the theme of this episode, which is, starting 2025 with intention and strategy, right? And really why strategic planning matters in wealth building, both from a, personal side of things, right? I do quarterly goal setting, and we'll talk a little bit about that here, but that quarterly goal setting isn't just, we want to buy one more building. It's not just, I want to be able to do 10 push-ups, right? Whatever it may be, it's a combo of all of it, right? It's kind of growth in all aspects. And I normally break it up into a few different areas, but it's both professional and personal that really helps move the entire ship forward and kind of starting with a intention in mind, right? Starting with that vision. And so I think to kind of kick this off, what I'd like to talk about briefly is different types of goal methodologies, right? SMART goals, which, a SMART goal, well, one, it should be smart in the traditional sense of the word, but also that's an acronym that stands for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound, right? So it's not just that, I want to be rich, right? It's better to say I want $1 million or I want $1 million by July 1st, right? The more specific you get and then measurable, right? How, if $1 million is easier to measure than if you just want to be rich, right? And is it achievable, right? If you're starting with $0 today and you have no citizenship and no assets and no job, that's not very achievable. Right. But if you have $950,000 and your goal is $1 million, it's probably achievable. So, and then relevant, does it actually relate to your life? Is it something you want to pursue? So, that goes into, tying that with your long-term goals. Does it really tie together with where you want to be in the long term? And there's other types of ways to measure goals. You don't have to do SMART goals. There's OKRs, which I think you might be a little more familiar with from your time in the tech world, Dustin.
Yeah. I mean, OKRs, objectives and key results. And I think I've certainly fallen victim to this trap of overthinking the goal setting process, right? And like, okay, which framework do I need to use and how should I do this? Should I use SMART goals? Should I use OKRs? I know people that even will set goals via KPIs. They're like, well, what are my key performance indicators for this year to like achieve these certain things? And I think, this is honestly me speaking more to myself than anything. It's just pick one and go, right? Like there's no perfect way.
Consistency is key.
Yes, you can iterate on it. If you do something for a quarter and find that it's not working, just change and go to something else. And there's all sorts of journals out there. I'm really curious to hear from you, Adam. I know you've been fairly diligent about a journal and a goal setting framework that I think the type of journal you use provides. And so again, no one right way, but I think you found something that works really well for you.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about that. Some of the tools that have worked well for me is I use a goal called the Phoenix Journal, or a goal planner called the Phoenix Journal. It's laid out well. It's a 12-week planner, so you use 4 of them a year, and you have 1 week of goal setting between each one. With that, it has it kind of takes you in phases, right? It starts with having you write a 4-year vision, right? Where are you going to be in 4 years? Where are you going to be in 1 year? Where do you not want to be? It has you write that. What's a future that you fear? And then where are you going to be in 12 weeks? And then from that 12 weeks, what I do is I take that and I build out 4 goals, right? And it's kind of a back and forth, but essentially you build 4 goals you're gonna move towards. Last quarter was increasing cash flow, saving more money, improving my health, and reading 3 books, right? So those are very specific. And then it goes down and has you break out each one of those into individual items, action steps, ways you measure it, ways it'll improve your life. And then it has a 12-week calendar, and you go through and you create checklist items that you need to do every week to try to achieve that goal. And Dustin may or may not know it, but there are items that I may follow up with him more frequently on during weeks. And I'm like, hey, we need to get this done. And it might be because at the beginning of the 12 weeks, I had planned that out to be done that week.
Okay.
So, that's kind of the system. And then you go into each week and you look back at your vision and your goals, and you plan that week. What are the things you need to do that are going to push you farther forward? And then each day you look at the week and you plan what your week is going to be. So my regular evening or morning routine is to look at the vision that I have. I alternate between them, but let's just say, the 1 year vision, and then you look at the goals and you look at the calendar, and then you look at if you're planning the week, you plan the week, and then you look at the week, and that's how you plan the day, right? And you start to chip away at those little things. So that's high level, the system I use. But really, I think at the end of the day, the reason that I do the quarterly goal setting is it allows me to just stick with a plan, right? Create 4 goals. And if I burn 12 weeks on it, even if it's not something I really ended up needing at the end of it, my life doesn't change a bunch in those 12 weeks, and it's probably going to push me forward. But more importantly, it's fast enough to create urgency and short enough that you didn't spend 10 years working on a goal you didn't want. So it is, and then it just has you build more intention into every day.
I think it's super important. You mentioned working on a goal that you didn't want, and that's why a lot of folks it can be tough to even do quarterly goal planning. But then what's really more important is that the long-term vision, right? That's what really allows you to know the goals. If it's coming back to the quarter, then to the week, and then to the day, that all of that is in alignment with where you want to be in the future. Mm-hmm. I always hate the analogy. I usually hear this in other contexts, but it applies here as well. If you spend your entire career climbing the corporate ladder only to get to the top and realize it wasn't somewhere you wanted to be, or that your ladder was up against the wrong building, right? Mm-hmm. And that's kind of the same thing. Like, you can have goals, but if you haven't really thought through where you want to be, and then the goals are aligned to that, you have the risk there of doing a whole bunch of work that might otherwise be good, but it doesn't get you where you want to go. And so that, in addition to, doing the quarterly stuff, and a lot of folks struggle with this. I struggle with this, right? To sit down and do this stuff and think out the future. And I used to think a lot of it was just so hokey, and I'm like, this is a bunch of hand wavy garbage. This doesn't matter, but it's super powerful. But if you don't sit down and do it, then you really have to start with that long-term vision and then work backwards. And it's why so many of these frameworks do that, because it's about that consistent alignment.
And a lot of that starts, just as a quick point, a lot of the ways that I start those are these journals. Have you started the goal setting seminars we've been to? It's all about what do you want, right? And it just write it down. There's an exercise that Robert does at the goals retreat is, if you have $1 million and you have to spend all of it today, and you can't invest it and you can't save it, what are you going to buy? You got to spend all of it. And just create a list, 10 things, 20 things, whatever it is. Your brain will come up with things, and maybe those are things you want in your long-term vision, right? So you just start to list out some of those things, and then that's, you drill down on those repeated over and over again, and that's how you start to build those. And I stick with the 4 year and the 1 year vision for a year at a time, and then I rewrite the 12 weeks every 12 weeks.
You may have touched on this briefly, but does the Phoenix Journal, does it have a end of week review sort of thing where you kind of look back at what was accomplished?
At the beginning of every week, it has a little bit of an end of week. I mean, there's check boxes, so I can see if I've done it. And there's also, but at the beginning, I have it sitting here in front of me. At the end of every week, there is questions, and it's what victories from the past week are you proud of? What do I most need to improve on? And then what am I most grateful for? And it takes, and those 3 questions are just a little bit of a reflection on the week before.
Oh, that's really good. So you kind of got that built-in accountability where you're going to have to answer that at the end of the week.
Yeah, and then paired with that, I also have an accountability partner that I work with, right? And he's not involved in any of the businesses, but it's one guy. I met him at a conference years ago, and we've been doing this for about 2 years now. And every Friday we have a call and see, hey, how's it going? Are you still? Did you get your stuff done for the week? So. I ended up at his wedding. We were doing goal setting during his wedding, and I texted him on his wedding day. I said, "A wedding's no excuse to not set your goals, buddy." And he didn't get them done, but he had a valid excuse.
That's I don't want to gloss over that. That's do you feel like that doing that? It seems like it was more accidental than intentional, but do you feel like having that accountability partner has really been a positive influence?
I think at least in the beginning, one, it's someone just to talk through some of the stuff with, especially someone you shouldn't be your business partner, it shouldn't be your spouse, it shouldn't be someone you're actively involved with, but you can kind of say, this is where I'm at. They can ask you some questions. What's it meaningful? And more so than anything else, if you both set goals and at the end of it, you're like, oh shoot, I didn't do anything. I just, I got half of them done. You're like, I'm a failure. But then you look at your partner over there doing the same thing. It's like, yeah, I got half of them done too, right? And it's just like life gets in the way, and you start to figure out which ones work more. You make them more specific. You look at some of the goals that we set when we first started this 2 years ago. They were broader, less way less smart, right? And so now I've almost dialed in that, I have 2 big goals and 2 small goals, right? The read 3 books last quarter was a small goal, right? Get myself down to 15% body fat was my larger health goal, right? And then I have 1 large business goal and 1 small business goal. So, they kind of all tie together, but you start to see what you can set and what you can't set. And it just, that accountability partner more than anything else makes it consistent enough that I kept doing it to the point where now it's just an ingrained habit, because you felt bad showing up on Friday if you didn't have the journal filled out.
Sure. Yeah.
And so with that being said, the other thing that, I want to talk about briefly, and this might not apply to as many of our listeners, so we'll just touch on it briefly, but even goal setting inside companies, right? Maybe a lot of people, even at their companies, they might work inside of a system for quarterly goal setting. Company rocks. We work inside, all of our companies are inside of a system called EOS, Entrepreneurial Organization System, I believe. It might be operating system. I always get them backwards. Entrepreneurial Operating System. And it's just it's a goal setting system at its core, right? I mean, it's a system of processes that you go and you outline your business, and then you talk about how you set goals and track goals, and then get your team to track the goals. And at the end of the day, that is what creates kind of accountability even inside the business. So I have, both the personal goals and then, even if they're business goals inside of my journal, but then the company itself and all the employees will have their own, we call them rocks, which are really their quarterly goals. And as a team, we'll review those and check on each other, right? Like almost inside the companies, right? On all of our L10s, Dustin, we essentially are all each other's accountability partner, because at the beginning of the week, you've got your goal and is on track or off track. And if they say off track, we get to talk about why.
Yeah. And with the to-dos that are forced in EOS, right? Like your name's associated with all that stuff. And when you know that you're going to have to answer for something, it goes back to the accountability, right? When you know you're going to have to answer for something, you're much more likely to, human psychology means you're much more likely to get that done. Mm-hmm. But yeah, EOS is definitely good for that team alignment and for not to pitch EOS, but we know lots of people who run businesses much larger than ours on it, and they swear by it, and we swear by it too. And I feel like we can always improve how we run it, but it's definitely good for getting everyone aligned onto the same page. And especially this time of year, I mean, depending on goal setting cadences, some folks are kind of like 1 month offset, but we're right here at the beginning of the year, start of Q1. A lot of folks are going to be going through that business goal setting process to set those rocks in EOS. And so it's a great tool for getting everybody aligned.
One thing I want to touch on briefly, and then we'll take a minute and kind of talk about some success stories we've had with setting goals before we close this out. But we have, how do you deal with things that have changed, right? Or that, halfway through the quarter, your goals aren't aligned anymore, right? You don't want to pursue that anymore. And
I don't really know what you're talking about. I achieve all of my goals right on time every single quarter.
I'm sure that's why you're always late. So what, we talked about it a little bit earlier, just in that having that 12 weeks really is short enough that you shouldn't have to change a ton, but also something that, I've heard at the goal setting seminar with Robert, or things I've just learned, is you can't have goals for other people, right? I can't go set a goal for Dustin because I can't make him go do something, right? You can't will someone else to do something.
Yes, much to your chagrin.
And so I spend a lot of time really making sure that all my goals are self goals, right? Even if there's things that maybe want to get done with family or friends or trips, at the end of the day, the goals, I've noticed some of the goals that I failed on were the ones that maybe required input from other people, whereas they weren't just something that can better myself, or it could better my employees or create more business opportunities, all of that. Even some of my goals have things I delegate to team members, but at the end of the day, they are self-aligned goals that I have control over.
Yeah, for sure. And I think a big other piece to this is that no goal setting framework is it's not designed to be rigid. And I think if you go into it thinking that you're not going to have to make adjustments, or that there's not going to be the unexpected that crops up throughout the quarter or even each week, like if you should not be surprised by that. And your goal setting and your mindset towards it really should be prepared for the unexpected to come up. And even for you can set a goal and situations will evolve, and halfway through the quarter you realize, okay, that was probably a bad goal. We shouldn't have set that, or the circumstances have changed. We don't need that anymore. Or, okay, that was not important, and now this other thing that we should have prioritized is important. And I guess I'm talking here in the context of the business, but it's I think personal things too.
It all comes back to intention, right? Like as long as you had good intention to begin with, and you continue to have that intention, you are setting goals. Like there is an evolution to it, but it's all about that intention of accomplishing what you set out to do. I've got one quick story on that, which is the other day I was, I guess it was a quarter ago now, I was reviewing Q3, and at the end of every one of my goals, one of the things the Phoenix Journal has you do, and I think it's good, is you create a reward at the bottom of every goal. And some of them are simple. My health goal was tailored shirts. So if you start seeing me in nicer shirts, it's because I ordered some tailored shirts. And then but one of mine 2 quarters ago was if I raised $1 million, which kind of just happened. I thought we were way off, and I started doing the math. I was like, oh, we did raise $1 million. That my reward was a Rolex, right? And so the dealer's supposed to be shipping it out in the next month or so. But it's just kind of one of those fun things that you get on the tail end, right? And it pushes you, right? It's a thing you really want. And so even without, I was specific in my goals, right? I went through my habits and my actions and all that every week, but it was one of those goals that I really thought I hadn't achieved. And then I remember sitting at the coffee table and then looking up at a friend that was there, and I was like, I get a Rolex. I was like, this is a thing that I've told myself I get. I spent my whole acquisition fee. That maybe wasn't the best business decision, but it was this thing. I'd already pre-decided that if I accomplish this, I got it, and that helps push me through to the next thing. And it's something I've wanted since the Rolex Batmans were $5,000. So whoops.
Well, it's an incentive, right? Like and that's going to be different for everybody. Some folks react to this reward at the end that is something that they get. And you got, how many, I think back to kind of the opposite end of that is someone like Michael Jordan, right? Who would like create these fake stories in his mind about like somebody that had wronged him. Like the smallest little slight would now be like this thing that he was like, I'm going to go out and crush this person tonight. Even though it was like a tiny thing and it might have actually not even happened, and he was just making it up completely in his head. But the point is, like, he knew he was very, very well aligned with like the thing that was going to motivate him to achieve his goals. And so not even, beyond like the frameworks for writing them down and keeping track of them and accountability, but definitely like, I think that's an important part that a lot of goal setting things don't talk about, right? Like what's the incentive for accomplishing this? And I think for most people, it needs to be something better than, oh, well, I feel good about marking that one off or checking it off. There needs to be something more tangible or maybe intangible like revenge at the end of it. But that's definitely not a piece that I think should be overlooked.
Yep. Super important. Well, with that, I mean, if anyone wants to talk about goal setting, always reach out to us. We'll put a link to the Phoenix Journal that I use, that I like, in the release notes under the show here. And with that being said, remember, where freedom leads, real wealth follows, and join us on our next episode.
All right. Thanks, Adam. We'll see everyone next time.
Thanks for joining us on Wealth Independence. This show is for informational purposes only and is not financial, investment, legal, or tax advice, and does not constitute an offer to buy or sell securities. All investments carry risk, and investors should always conduct thorough due diligence and consult with qualified professionals before investing. Until next time, remember, freedom leads and real wealth follows.